이번에는 좀 특별한데 그 전통 VC 관점에서도 들을 수 있는 또 좋은 기회가 될 것 같습니다. 구글의 마이크 킴 APAC Partnership Manager님의 진행으로 국내외 대표적인 블록체인 분야 투자사인 SparkLabs, TransLink Capital, 하시드를 대표하는 멤버분들을 모시고 패널 토론을 진행하겠습니다. 주제는 Understanding the Investor Approach to Blockchain입니다. 그럼 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다.
Test. All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Erica, for putting on such an amazing conference. We've got 40 minutes with an incredibly distinguished panel of investors, and so just start with Bernard, maybe a quick introduction of yourself and the firm.
Sure, I'm Bernard Moon. I'm a co-founder of SparkLabs Group. We're a network of startup accelerators in 9 locations throughout the world. We have 3 VC funds, and I'm the partner that's based in Palo Alto, California.
Hi everyone, my name is Jay I'm one of the co-founders at TransLink Capital. TransLink Capital is a Silicon Valley-based technology early-stage venture capital firm. Our differentiation is that all the partners used to run the US venture capital operations for big Asian tech companies. I used to run Samsung Ventures. My partners did the same for firms like SoftBank, Foxconn, UMC, Hikari Sushin. And collectively now we work with multiple corporates across the region of Japan, Korea and Greater China, providing access to the Silicon Valley and US startup ecosystem. We are relatively a small investor in the blockchain ecosystem. We have made a handful of investments. We're very bullish about the prospects as we see more and more established entrepreneurs using blockchain as a technology layer to expand their business opportunities. So very excited to be here. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Jehan Chu. I'm the co-founder and managing partner of Kenetic. First of all, thanks again to Erica and June for putting on such a great conference, really privileged to be here. So Kenetic is a Hong Kong-based investment platform. We do high-frequency trading, we do equity investments and token investments. We had previously done things like advisory and OTC, so we've really covered the gamut of the blockchain and crypto community as it grew. I personally started around 2013. I'm the co-founder of the Bitcoin Association and the founder of the Ethereum meetup in Hong Kong. And we're really focused now on the equity side of kind of the blockchain space and supporting projects through their life cycle, through kind of seed and A and B rounds.
Hello, my name is Ethan Kim. I'm one of the co-founders and partner at Hashed. So we co-founded our company 2 years ago. Thanks to our background is engineering and entrepreneurship. So we were very lucky to jump in blockchain scene in early stage. So we are actively investing in DeFi projects and blockchain gaming, and also the infrastructure, which is focused on second layer solution nowadays. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. So clearly a really distinguished panel, and what I love about this, it's quite global. So it's not just Korea, it's APAC, and we have people that flew out 24 hours ago from San Francisco, so I really appreciate you guys making the turn. One of the things that people are really curious about is this blockchain application is so universal in so many verticals. Where have you seen this actually do well? What verticals have you seen that you've seen this technology actually take off so far? Jay, anything that you can?
Sure, I think the most obvious sector that's really gotten a lot of traction is really in the fintech sector. So financial services, if you think about the movement and transfer of money and currencies, obviously blockchains, one of the killer applications for blockchain has been cryptocurrency. But beyond that, various financial services from international remittance, even financial products are being leveraging blockchain on the back end. We're an investor in a company called Figure that actually is leveraging blockchain on the back end to do home equity loans, for example. And by utilizing blockchain and the various characteristics of immutability and whatnot, they can actually save transactions costs from anywhere from 150 to 200 basis points, which is quite substantial. if you think about any transaction, let's say mortgage transactions and whatnot. And because of that, their traction in the actual financial space between loan originators as well as the buyers and sellers have been quite substantial. So that's just one of the many use cases that I'm sure the other panelists can point to.
Yeah. Any outside of fintech, Bernard, anything that really excites you or companies that you've seen?
Yeah, I would say the two categories are most active are probably enterprise and fintech. So in enterprise, one of our companies is Blocko. They went through our accelerator here in Seoul in 2015, and now they've become the leading enterprise player in South Korea. They have 21 enterprise clients with companies such as Samsung Credit Card, Korea Exchange, Korea Bank of Korea, and several others. We also have seen it implemented, not in our portfolio, but with one of our partners. We run a corporate accelerator with Ping An Insurance. And so they've implemented blockchain throughout various groups on the back end of their insurance processes. And then also obviously fintech. So we've seen it just across the board. And one of our companies on our seed fund that's in the US, we invest in a company called Dharma. So they just recently launched a product called Lever, which makes it very simple and easy to borrow and lend. And they just launched it a few months ago. And it's been interesting because the volume, I mean, it's early, but the volume is on average over, I'd say over like 3 million.
Wow. So. Since you guys travel so much, I'd love to get a sense of, outside of Korea, where we've seen a boom in this kind of development in blockchain, what are the regions in APAC or just around the world interest you? Where do you see this development exploding?
Yeah, sorry, just want to back up to that one question.
Yeah,
I just want to, if you don't mind, I'll add one more kind of aspect to that, which is I think is more around tokenization and assets, kind of securing assets with tokens. And I'm sure Ethan can talk more about the kind of gaming side of that. But in terms of just pure excitement, right, I think that, the enterprise side is very interesting, and it's really, we have an enterprise-first growth strategy at Kenetic where we think, the first 100 million customers will come through enterprise. But in terms of things that are interesting and exciting, I think that the tokenization of assets is most exciting. And it's not only in things where we're investing in like Shares Post and others that are doing security tokens. We're seeing a lot of interest in actual like digital goods. So not just NFTs, but digital twins. The ability to basically take physical objects, secure them in a location, and then issue a digital twin, which can then freely float in the economy, freely float in different people's wallets, and basically add liquidity, velocity, and kind of value along its life cycle as it's being traded. The ability to add metadata to physical objects that are sitting somewhere like that, I think really has a really large potential to add quite a lot of value to the ecosystem where there wasn't any before. So it's really a binary difference between the types of things that are possible. And to me, that when I think about the possibility, it's far off, maybe 1 or 2 years before it's really kind of widespread. But you can see how this type of thing can become very viral with certain communities, like sneakerheads or fashion or even this. So to me, that's like what gets me up. It's like, wow, that's super fun.
Sure. Ethan, I'd love to get your opinion because Hashed is one of the most profound funds in the space. How do you take a look at this space?
Right. So I think two verticals really excite me currently. So the first one is blockchain gaming. So when I think about my teenager, I remember that I modified the configuration file of those to only play to game. So actually, at that time, it was really natural process to me and my friends to play the game. So I think content is really attractive power to move people's attention. So I think this very similar things will happen in near future in blockchain scene as well. So as Jehan said, NFT is very good concept, great invention on top of blockchain gaming. So many companies are making NFTs on top of blockchain, and also they are making uniqueness and scarcity in the games. So when you think about uniqueness and scarcity, there are lots of online games which is focused on that concept, so that players can compete with each other to win the other players. So I think this concept is very well matched with a blockchain concept. And also in DeFi sector, I think in the future we'll be more and more spending our times on virtual life in the future. So at that time, this NFT concept game items or the cryptocurrencies are not anymore just as a cryptocurrencies. So it can be regarded as your asset in virtual life. So for example, the MakerDAO if you look into the MakerDAO's open CDP position, it is increasing consistently nowadays. So the more and more sophisticated financial products related to our virtual assets will come in the future, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. Jehan, you actually brought up a unique point. You said it's going to take about 1 or 2 years before massive adoption. What do you think are the hurdles that, or all of you guys, in order for this massive adoption to happen, what do you think needs to happen?
Yeah, I think that, again, going back to the enterprise side of things, enterprise not necessarily meaning, just like the large kind of financial companies, but the incumbents, the large monopolies and conglomerates in every kind of vertical. You might think that it would be like an Epic in the gaming industry or like an Ubisoft. It really will take, I think, these types of players to fully onboard and commit to blockchain and ideally tokenization as well, and some form of public-private hybrid where they're not only just generating value within kind of a closed silo, but then build the kind of hooks so that the community can build on top. But that's a fundamental shift culturally and business-wise for a lot of these, especially gaming, because they're so used to being able to control their economies and their gaming economies. So I hope that somehow someone will kind of show that if you take the leap, that a lot of money and a lot of opportunity can be made. But barring that, I think it's going to be very hard for kind of smaller startups to get that breakout hit where you're seeing tens of millions of users. So in some ways, I think it's an education game for these enterprise and an economic game to really show them that there is money to be made and that there is kind of like opportunity there.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Bernard.
Yeah, just on top of that, I don't think it's just about adoption through enterprise. I think this downturn has been good because it has sort of filter out the bad actors and low-quality players, and now you see people just really building great products. So what we've seen, even we invested in, it was like back in 2014, a cryptocurrency brokerage called Safe Fellow in Stockholm, and their peak volume during the bull run was December 2017, but they just improved the front end of their product, their UI UX. And the onboarding took 30 seconds for someone to basically sign on and buy cryptocurrency. December 2018, during the downturn, they had 20x in trading volume versus the bull run, and also 8x user growth. So I think that just shows that as products mature and become more high quality in terms of the product, UI, UX, and everything, then that'll also lead to more mass market adoption.
Gotcha. Because you had brought up more larger institutions kind of coming into play, it begs the question of just your opinion on maybe Facebook coming into the space with Libra. Whether that's blockchain, it could be debated, but I would love to get your opinion on just Facebook's move into this space and your thoughts on Libra in general. Jay, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. I think it was well documented when Facebook announced their Libra project. And it was met with a lot of fanfare, also a lot of concern. I think it's kind of a dual sword that Facebook is leading the charge. The benefit, obviously, is because they are Facebook and they have massive distribution and the ability to actually align over 20 different global partners across fintech, across telcos, consumer services, even investors to line up for the Libra project. At the same time, because it was Facebook and for the reasons that we all are well aware of over the past 12 to 18 months related to privacy and other concerns, there is a lot of scrutiny. The reality is, I think many of you are already aware that some of the leading tech companies beyond Facebook, and that's not just in the US, but also in Asia, in Korea, in Japan, in Southeast Asia, Europe, etc., everybody's working on opportunities to make blockchain as an underlying technology more proliferated, utilizing tokenization as a business model. And at the end of the day, if you think about it, there was a time 20 years ago where there was a concept called an internet company. And then 10 years ago, there were mobile companies. And if you think about it, what company today isn't an internet company? What company isn't a mobile company today? And in my opinion, as soon as we don't even start talking about blockchain companies, where blockchain is now invisible to the end user, whether it's a business customer or an end consumer, that's when it really starts to proliferate. And so I do believe it's still in early stages. I think the Facebook project still will face a lot of scrutiny and may be delayed. The reality is there's actually real-life use cases that are being used today. For example, transactions tokens. I think many of you in the room are aware of the Terra project, which as a transaction token, which is backed by a stablecoin, is being actively used on one of the largest e-commerce platforms in Korea. That is a everyday use case. And most people, they don't care that it's blockchain on the back end. You know, the gaming applications that we talked about, tokenization is an obvious business model innovation that just makes a lot of sense for digital assets in general. So again, the concept of tokenization should become invisible over the next 6 to 12 months as that continues to proliferate. So as I said earlier, I'm very bullish that because there are enough high-quality companies and high-quality entrepreneurs that are working on the problem to make it easier for the end user, the end customer, to actually utilize it without even thinking about it, that it's going to proliferate even more so than what we can imagine today.
Awesome. Any other thoughts?
Oh yes,
Go ahead,
can.
Ethan.
So in Korea, actually there was a project. It is still going on. So which is very similar to the Libra's approach. So if you look into the Libra's approach, the core is they are making consortium with the partnership with the real use cases. So in Korea, as you know, Clayton, which has like KakaoTalk has 50 million users globally. So, and also the Line is preparing their own blockchain, which is called Link. So they have 200 million users globally as well. So I think the mass user adoptions in terms of the corporation is very, very near to our future. So Kakao wants to adopt the users with the existing social graphs by using their social messengers. And also Libra's approach is very similar. So I think once the Clayton launched their blockchain by integrating Kakao or their own another messenger, I think users are very natural to use cryptocurrencies or game items or NFTs on top of the social graphs. So when you look or recall our internet era, so in 1999, there was a high-speed internet which was called ADSL established in South Korea. And at that time, I recall many PC방 was established in South Korea as well. So there are 7,000 PC cafe, which is called PC방 in Korea. So PC방 is in Korea. So I used to go to PC방 with my friends by skipping my academic classes to play the game. So this is kind of infrastructure. So Kakao and Libra, they have their own social services, which has lots of mass users. So I think it always helped to bring the users to onboard their services in the future.
Just a side question, Ethan, what is your favorite game?
Good question. So my favorite game is League of Legends and PUBG.
Got it.
So it is focused on esports, and I think there are many similar things between community-oriented user-generated contents and the esports. So when you think about esports, their origin was the user-generated content. So if you think about League of Legends, it is AOS type game, and AOS type game was originated from Dota All-Stars. It was a game inside of the Warcraft 3, and it was made by the tool which was provided by Blizzard in the Warcraft 3. So there is a map editor. With that map editor, people and gamers made a new game which was called Dota All-Stars. That was the origin of the League of Legends. So when you think about community and strong fan base, it always helped to grow the esports community as well. So if you think about XC Infinity, which is a crypto game, there are lots of community out there, but XC Infinity's community is very, very strong. And the fan base is really strong to play the game. So I think the community is really important to acquire users and make their attention keep high. So esports and blockchain gaming, there are many similar things in terms of the community.
Very cool. One of these days you have to teach me how to play. Bernard, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just talking about going back to sort of Libra, I think the long-term implementations are interesting. I can't even say it right now. Because like several years ago, I always thought that once like China, not just China, but several of the top OECD nations launch their own cryptocurrency, that's going to change the landscape. And Ali said that it would probably create a culling of like hundreds of sort of altcoins and narrow it down to like 10, 20, right? But instead of my thesis of China and some other major nations launching their own currency sooner than later, I think it's now Facebook, right? But I think Libra will probably have the same sort of impact, right? It'll create this culling, but also like other national sort of cryptocurrencies, it sort of goes against the whole mantra of the whole space, right? Because their privacy will not be respected in the same way. So it's just gonna be interesting to see the adoption and how it affects the whole landscape.
Yeah, just to finish off the kind of Libra conversation. On the first hand, I think that Libra is an incredible project. I think it's net positive for the blockchain and crypto community. I think it pushes the ball forward in terms of just sheer mind share. It forces every CEO in the world to really take seriously this idea of blockchain and crypto and come up with a stance and say, what do I believe that Mark Zuckerberg believes or not? And I think that they have to take a stance. But even more, I think where Libra is interesting is that this idea of kind of almost like the identity wars, and this idea that previously, or like and historically, our identity has mostly been based on a sovereign kind of identity backed by our government, which is fine. It's been very useful to an extent. But now we have many other types of identities that are backed by different types of value. And arguably, Facebook is one of the largest purveyors of identity economy. They have your identity. How many things do you sign in? And whether it's Facebook or someone else, your Kakao, whether you're WeChat, you're using it as an identity layer. So Libra ultimately is actually not about the payment system, in my mind. I mean, it is, but it's not. It's actually about Facebook looking at how they extend their identity economy and back it with a massive, massive kind of payment rail. But the payment side is only the first foray. I think that there will be many other types of applications because identity is the root of everything. Unfortunately, we haven't seen the type of traction in the identity space that we would like to in the decentralized world. Civic, Uport, they haven't been able to get as much traction as we would have liked. And so here you have this enterprise coming in, turning on identity and kind of like making it valuable with this decentralized type of payment rails. And I think that's where it goes. And the reason why this is important is because it will force all the other governments, all the other major kind of enterprises to really think about, wow, who's going to own identity, or who's going to have kind of an option into this identity layer, and should I be doing my own thing? And I think, to be fair, Kakao, like, WeChat, well, not WeChat, but Line, they're already doing this in their own way, and I think that's really what the play is. So I'm looking at more the identity space and where that opportunity is.
I mean, I think for folks that are not as familiar with the actual Facebook team that's working on Libra, so the leader of that project, David Marcus, one thing to note was he actually is a PayPal alum, so he's very familiar with the online payment transaction side of things. And prior to leading the Libra project, he was head of the Facebook Messenger project as well. And so the best way for us to consider how seamless Libra can potentially be is, we're all familiar with messenger apps, and Facebook Messenger is obviously one of the leading apps that, if you think about it from a global scale, obviously Kakao, Line, WeChat are dominant in their domestic geographies, but as a global messenger app, WhatsApp and WeChat, which all are owned by Facebook, I'm sorry, WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger are all owned by Facebook, and the ease of how we communicate over Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, from a messaging perspective, think about how we could potentially utilize that for transactions. So the way that we use Venmo or Toss in Korea. And basically, they're building the payment rails to enable that very, very seamlessly. And again, that has multiple implications. So as soon as we stop thinking about what's the underlying technology and just think about the practical ease of use cases, then it becomes much more prevalent. And I believe it's a matter of time. And while Facebook is going to be scrutinized and criticized and whatnot, they're going to launch. They're going to launch, and it's going to be useful, and people are going to start using it. But it's not just going to be just Facebook. Every single major social platform or commerce platform are launching similar things. And so very quickly, all of those kind of technical terms will go away.
Really is really interesting, and I think we could probably talk about Facebook Libra just for another hour. Just to switch gears though, because this is such a global panel and you guys are looking at companies all over the world and investing in them, can you give me a sense of the regions or at least the countries you're most interested in when you're looking at the blockchain space? So Korea being one, but outside of that, what other regions around the world are you focused in on where you see the development really maturing? Go ahead.
I think just general hotspots. I mean, we see a lot of activity in the Nordics, in Stockholm. Berlin is definitely a hotbed too. I think Singapore, obviously, San Francisco, Seoul, you know, throughout Asia. So.
Have you guys seen anything different, or do you guys kind of mirrored that?
So for us, you know, we are based in the U.S. We invest in primarily U.S. companies, but because of our presence in Asia as well, we look at both sides. If you look at the latest statistics, I think we're all aware that, you know, over the past 18 months, really the token financings have really died down, and the majority of financings right now are equity financings. And so statistically, the US is still dominant in equity financings across the board, but also in the blockchain space as well. Over 40% are still happening in the US from a dollar perspective. Quickly followed by China, the UK, Singapore, Korea. I think those are the top 5. And the opportunities are still, I think, very massive. And for obvious reasons, the US still gets a lot of attention because of the scale of these projects. And while there's still, I would say, a certain level of regulatory uncertainty, the good news is, at least in the US, there are active conversations going on between the regulators, the SEC namely, between the regulators and the entrepreneurs, or the various interest groups, to provide guidelines. And as long as you are within those guidelines, it's almost like their regulatory kind of strategy is really like a ranch strategy. So as long as you don't go over the fences, you can do whatever you want. The challenge in Asia, especially in Korea, I think we're all aware of, is that instead of letting the horses run wild, it's more of a traditional kind of, I think the word better in Korean is like mokchuk, which means that it's basically farming and it's planned. So every single step along the way, you need approval to get there. And those kind of uncertainties make it even more challenging. So while we are actively looking for investments and have invested in Korea and other parts of Asia, there's actually more regulatory uncertainty that makes it additional risk for us to consider as we look at investments there.
Sure. There's so many people that want to invest in this space. Ethan, I'm really curious. You have the privilege of looking at so many great startups coming up. When you're investing in the blockchain or a blockchain company, what are you looking for in a team? What catches your eye that says this is something that I want to put my money into?
Right, it's a very good question. So the first one is we look into how much fast is the team moving. So in this crypto scene, crypto industry is moving a lot faster than the traditional IT industry. So the agility is everything that we believe. So if when you look into the team, we review the teams, and while during our due diligence, some projects or some teams show us very remarkable progress even in the due diligence phase. So we like the team, like that type of team first. And the second one is business ability. So this crypto scene is very well connected to each other globally, I mean. So from the first time of the project, thanks to the cryptocurrency's nature, the project is global. So business ability and business development ability to make a right partnership with the right companies are really important to us. So that is the second thing. And the third one is how much the community is strong in terms of their project. So if they have ability to raise a strong community and strong fan base in crypto projects, I think it is directly related to the crypto project success. So these three criteria are three things that we are looking for.
Totally makes sense. Do you guys have an opinion on kind of what you guys are looking for before making an investment?
Yeah, I mean, for Kenetic, our current fund is an equity fund, so we're investing in blockchain projects, but only in equity. So we're not investing in tokens out of this particular fund. And so with that in mind, we're really looking for some of the more traditional kind of boring answers like ability to execute. And I have to say that aside from adoption and traction, like the ability to execute, how well can the founder not only come to me with a plan about how they're going to go to market and execute on that, but actually how fluent are they in the actual aspects of executing and carrying it out? A lot of people can put a decent deck together and kind of stumble through it. But when you have experienced entrepreneurs who have done multiple companies and potentially had exits, there's a certain kind of level of conviction where you can feel that they're on it. They understand it backwards and forwards. And when you talk about execution, it literally is execution. They just know that they need to execute on what they've planned out, and they have that kind of muscle memory of execution. So there's a deeper level of execution, like pattern recognition that we look for, and I think at least for kind of slightly later stage companies that we look at in A and B, that's really what we're looking for. We're not necessarily looking for the most novel ideas. We really want to see that next phase of the companies that are going to make it out of that kind of seed and pre-seed kind of tranche and really start to show some type of growth.
Awesome. We're almost at time, and I do want to give time to the audience, so I'm just going to maybe finish up with one last question here. We had touched about it real briefly here, but governments do play a role here, and so does policy. So if you were to give some advice to a particular country on how to develop its future policy around financial regulations and the things that are coming around right now, any just high-level notes that you would say, if you could talk to a minister just as they think about the future policy regulations they would have, let's say in the financial space, any kind of tips as an investor that you would advise them on? No?
So I'll ask one question. So I think in opportunity-wise, developing country has more opportunity than a developed country. So if we think about the fiat currency of developing countries, it may be less trusted by the people in the country. So innovations come from that side. So of course we have a risk, but I think more and more opportunities are from the risk. So I think the government or the policy should consider that part. And also if we think about the Libra project, of course it is being scrutinized right now. But even though Facebook is not doing that project, there will be another project which will do the same things. So from the government-wise, I think to make an innovation of that country, we should be more open to new technology and new user adoption opportunities.
Any other final comments?
Yeah, just really briefly. I mean, unfortunately, it's very hard to move government. I mean, they're really there to kind of try and protect the citizens, and they know their locale best. And there are different layers where some countries are more corrupt than others, and so they have different considerations. So, very basically, I think it's just a matter of helping them to kind of stay open and listen. If they can invest, I always think that it's very impressive. Where you see. Countries like Singapore kind of actively investing, and sometimes, we often see them at the cap table next to us and like, wow, they're investing in this, that's great. They're very kind of aggressive in that side, and I think that's a great way not only to learn and to stay open, but also to kind of signal the country's commitment to kind of innovation.
I guess one comment, and I've seen both sides of this. I see some of the more advanced countries in terms of kind of regulation around the fintech space in general, not only blockchain, are the countries like the US and Singapore that actually study and understand it before jumping to conclusions. And unfortunately, we've seen this case, especially for many of us here in the room, where the lack of understanding or the lack of even the willingness to understand has made it very confusing by conflicting messages from different parts of the government and different regulatory bodies that have just created more confusion and actually has had the opposite effect of what the intent was, which was to protect the citizens that didn't have the knowledge. And frankly, I think many of us experienced when the whole Bitcoin crash happened 18 months ago, a lot of that came from these multiple announcements that weren't as fully educated, didn't appreciate the overall impact to the ecosystem, and created, in fact, more people lost money during that period of time here in Korea than anywhere else in the world, right? And so while there's always good intentions, I think it's really important to make sure that you fully understand and take the time to understand and listen to people that have more experience and knowledge before making public statements and making policy decisions.
Definitely.
I have to say that. I mean, it's just
Keeping
been
an
sad
open
to see.
mind and listening, for sure.
Yeah.
We've got an incredible panel here. I'd love to open it up to the audience if you have any questions outside. I can't really see. Oh, yes. Do you want me to just hand the mic? I'll just... Oh, okay.
네, 저 코인데스 코리아의 김병철 기자고요. 저는 그냥 그 한국말로 질문을 하겠습니다. 짧은데요. 지금 카카오나 라인 그리고 페이스북 같은 경우에 블록체인 이제 사업에 본격적으로 뛰어들었는데 사실 다 대기업들이거든요. 그리고 금융 분야에서는 피델리티 같은 회사들이 이미 시작을 하고 있고 이렇게 보면 블록체인 산업이 계속 이제 성숙할수록 스타트업들의 기회는 줄어드는 게 아닌가라는 질문에 대해서 답변을 좀 요청드립니다.
Yeah, as you know, kind of talking about the kind of enterprise growth strategy that we have. Actually, we are very interested in startups still. We think there's a lot of opportunity to invest in them, but it's the way that we invest. What we're really looking for from startups are the startups that will service enterprise, that work to help enterprise get into the space. Could potentially be acquired by these enterprises, and who can help add value. I think, you know, obviously we've seen Facebook start to do acquisitions. I think we're about to kind of embark on maybe, you know, 2 or 3 years of mergers and acquisitions as a phase, while the mainstream kind of audience gets used to kind of crypto. And after that, there will be a lot more opportunity for startups when, you know, the startups aren't responsible for, you know, the several million user customer acquisition, which is very, very difficult. So I think it's going to happen in phases, but we are still very, you know, kind of interested in investing in startups. We only invest in startups, so it's not a bad thing at all.
If you think about a fully decentralized project, I think the level of technology is not there yet. So there are a lot of rooms to be improved in terms of a technical way. So Ethereum or the other public blockchains which is focused on decentralization is having a TPS problem, scalability issues. So I think Libra or Clayton is finding a way somewhere between the centralization and decentralization to make a mass user adoption. So after that time, as Jehan said, there is a lot of room to jump in for startups to jump in this space, and they will make cooperation. They will make a synergy in cooperative way, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there'll always be innovations. I don't think you should always worry about like Facebook or Google or who's ever out there. I mean, no one expected Zoom to be so successful in an already quote-unquote mature space, Slack, or even just the recent companies that went public. You know, if you run to an investor that says, oh, what about, you know, Google could do what you're doing, I think you maybe should consider talking to another investor. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, all the major platform players that you just mentioned, from Facebook to Kakao, Line, WhatsApp even, WeChat, these were all startups 10, 15 years ago. And so not only is there an opportunity for startups to potentially take away those platform dominances, like it's transitioned over the past 20, 30 years, the opportunity for startups to actually take advantage of blockchain opportunities where, you know, there's gaps to be filled. There's going to be these big companies needing help to actually proliferate. There's going to be picks and shovel tool providers to enable more safe or secure usage of these platforms and whatnot. So I'm personally more bullish than ever because once the adoption happens at the enterprise level, there's just going to be more feeding opportunities for startups to fill in those gaps.
Was there another question in the audience? Oh, yes, in the back. Go ahead.
Hi everyone. So I basically have like two questions. First of all, like when it comes to the companies, when it comes to the investment, so do you think like it matters like a company is located at which part of the world? Like would you consider like if a company is located in Korea or whether it's in Saipan or it's registered in USA, for example? So like most of the time we hear like, you know, companies which are registered in States, they have more chances to get the investments as compared to the companies which are registered in the Korea. So that's why that was the first question, like, does it matter, like, where it is registered? And second thing, like, I know, like, you guys receive, like, you know, lots of, proposals every day about investments and whatnot. So you know, Jehan was saying like execution matters a lot. But for other things like their technical, you know, capabilities like TPS or their consensus as algorithm, do you look at that particular things also? For example, like, you know, Bitcoin is just like 7 TPS, Ethereum 20. But like if a project comes up with, you know, like 100,000 or 200,000 TPS or something like that. So do you think these kind of technological things also matter a lot when it comes to investment or not? Thanks.
So very quickly on the geography side, each firm has a different focus and different geography targets. So in our case, it's the US primarily, and then in my case, because I commute to Korea every other month, we'll look at opportunities there. So that's a quick question. It's going to be different for everybody here. On your question, second question, which I think is more relevant, at least for us, the technical capabilities to me is only one piece of the puzzle, and frankly, from a relative perspective, it's less important. There are many very strong technical teams, but if the criteria for us is there's very few of those technical teams that have actually built scalable platforms and that have been able to build scalable businesses on top of that. So that to me is the scarcity factor. So for our investment thesis, we are actually backing entrepreneurs that have actually gone through this process and have built scalable businesses that have the ability to recruit top-notch technical teams instead of going the other way around. But that's just our case.
Can I just, this is a little bit of a side note. On the domicile thing, no, I don't really care where they're domiciled as long as it's not like a red flag. It's more about where your market, where's your team. On the technical side, many people say they have, well, we've got like 50, 100, whatever, 1,000 TPS. It's just a number. I mean, none of this is kind of really in the wild actually being used, and so that's the real measure. But the one last thing I just want to add before we wrap up is, I think that, you know, if you're sitting in the audience thinking that, oh, okay, well, the investors are up here and we're, you know, either we're kind of the service providers or we are the kind of founders, like, you're missing the point. Part of like the unique thing about blockchain and crypto is that our roots are as investors ourselves and participants in the community. It's the community that actually allowed so much of the development through investing in crypto projects and funding. And I think that if you're in the audience and you're not participating to some degree as an investor, you're participating in some of these crowd sales, et cetera, obviously you got to do your diligence, then I think that there's a real opportunity being missed for who we are as a community and what makes us different from every other generation of technology investments. And if you want to understand the mind of an investor, start investing. $5, $10, $1,000, whatever it is. I think ultimately that's what kind of is pretty exciting and a bigger opportunity for the entire community as founders and professionals, and not just, you know, this kind of like, well, the investors up here and we're something else.
We've got a minute left, so last question here right in the middle. Go ahead. There's a mic right there.
Hello. It's been said that the ICO craze basically disrupted VC investment, venture capitalism. Do you see a potential next shocker coming for the venture cap space? And if so, what would it look like?
Great one to end on.
I mean, so there was a period of time that ICO investing totally outstripped equity investing in blockchain. But ICO investing has never made a dent in the overall venture capital picture. And whatever dent that happened during the first half of 2018 is now completely gone. So it actually hasn't changed. And if anything, now, as you see, many of the crypto-related investments, blockchain-related investments are now being done in equity. And so the venture capital industry has not been really impacted. I think what's been helpful and healthy is that a lot of the investors are now more open-minded about the medium of investment. So many of the venture funds, including ourselves, have gone through a process where now we're open-minded. We can do token investments, we can do equity investments. And so that's actually just educated the market and given more opportunities for the right type of financings to happen.
Yeah, I would say the best indicator during the whole ICO craze was the bellwether in Silicon Valley is Y Combinator. I mean, they didn't lose any influence or power. People still wanted to be part of YC for their 120K for 7%, right? People still want, you know, the best entrepreneurs, at least in Silicon Valley, if not the US or a lot of the world, they want smart money. So the ICO craze didn't impact venture capital at all, you know, even though people were saying, oh, it's going to kill it.
I think the next development that you should be looking for in equity investing generally, not just VC, is time. How is time as a resource being compressed by things like tokenization, where you have platforms like SharesPost that we invested in and Securitize that are tokenizing assets? How are they adding liquidity and compressing the amount of time that it takes to kind of turn over these investments? Like, that is actually a severe disruption, potential disruption to VC, and I think it absolutely will happen, where you're going to start to see more liquid private markets. Companies are staying private longer, but there's liquidity there. And that's, I think, going to change the types of calculations that investors are going to have to make when they think about, okay, well, if I'm putting, you know, $100 into this for a 7-year lockup, if I only have a 3-year lockup or a 2-year lockup or a 1-year lockup where I'm liquid, can I take more risk? And so that risk versus time is pretty interesting.
Yes, when we review the tokens, it is very hard, very difficult for us to make a valuation of the tokens currently. So, and also we are very worried about the future conflicts between the equity and the tokens. So the corporation and shareholders are having has the equity, but in terms of the tokens, token is spread out to the public investors and also the private investor as well. So so it depends on the team's willingness to where the value accrue will happen. So in terms of the investment-wise, we see more and more projects are going toward equity. It's going back to traditional VC way. So I think it is more simple to make a valuation, and it is somehow healthy. So, but in terms of opportunity, I think there will be some potentials in the token-wise if they have concrete use cases with the token economics. So we will see.
Awesome. Well, just a huge round of applause. Thank you guys so much for your time. You guys have done an incredible job. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you guys enjoy the lunch. Thank you.